Hello and welcome to the romance track here at Continual. And we're continuing to celebrate Pride Month with some LGBTQ romance wins. And we're going to talk about that and why we love LGBTQ and male romance right after our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Ari.
Hi, I'm Ari McKay, and with my writing partner, Rachel Langella, who is also here, we write contemporary romance as the Ari McKay brand, and we write paranormal as the Rachel Langella brand.
Okay, Beth.
I'm Beth Bolden. I write contemporary romance. So have dabbled a little bit in fantasy, which was really fun and exciting, and I want to do that some more. But mostly just romance, specifically sports, is what I'm focusing on right now.
Okay, Raven.
I am Raven deHart, and I also write, well, this is paranormal is under Raven deHart, contemporary is under Alex Danvers, and yeah, it's male romance.
Awesome. And Davidson.
I'm Davidson King, and I write gray romance, which is not dark, not light, just right in the middle. I'm big with the anti-heroes, and I also write paranormal romance, of course, as well.
Okay, Elle?
Hi, I'm Elle Keaton, and I 90% write romantic suspense set on a little small town that I get to do whatever I want in, because it's mine. And I also write a few contemporary romances. I have a few contemporary romance series that are a little more lighthearted in, the content, but they're all romance.
Great. Rachel?
I'm Rachel Langella, and as Ari said, we write together. I don't think there's a genre that we haven't tried, but we are all about the male romance and happy ending.
Stephanie?
Hey everybody, my name is Stephanie Burke. I am a USA Today bestselling author who's put out about 100 or so novel short stories in small pieces. And oh my goodness, I love my LGBTQ community. My oldest child is trans, and she's like, "Mom, you're like the alphabet mafia mom." So I'm here to support the alphabet mafia. So I write romance, erotica, horror, sci-fi, suspense, whatever basically captures my attention.
Very nice. And Layla?
Yeah, hi, I'm Layla Reyne. I write LGBTQ romance. Romantic suspense, mostly a little bit of contemporary romance, usually foodie oriented because I am. And yeah, so I write male, poly, FF, MF, all queer romance though. So
food and sex, what's not to love?
A little bit of action every now and then too.
Yeah, well, you gotta move, burn off the calories, burn off the food, yeah. And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Brice is Gail. I write epic and urban fantasy. Many of the series have prominent LGBTQ characters. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance with a lot of spooky chills and sexy thrills. So something for everybody. So what attracted you to writing male or LGBTQ romance, Beth?
Oh, you're gonna make me go first.
I'm moving around my little Brady Bunch, so nobody is safe. I'm moving around my little 9-square picture.
Usually, since my name starts with B, I'm always first anyway, so I'm kind of used to that. What attracted me to it first? Well, I actually started my career writing kind of sports, romantic comedy almost. That was back in 2014. And I was kind of like, I published a couple books, and I was really kind of dismayed by the trend at the time, which were these super jerk guys who didn't treat their partners very well. And so I kind of got out of writing for a while, and I was active in a bunch of fan fiction communities, and I started reading slash fan fiction, and I really started kind of understanding, because I was part of the Tumblr community, like words like pansexual, bisexual. I was from like a really middle class, like small community, like we were in, it was outside of Portland, Oregon. So it was liberal, but like we didn't get exposed to those terms like when I was growing up, and I didn't even know what they meant. Like we knew that there were people that were gay, and then there was everybody else. And if you weren't gay, then you were just everybody else. And so because I started becoming exposed to those terms, it kind of like kickstarted this own realization that I had, which was that I was bi. And so then I started kind of researching that more, and I ended up kind of writing this spin-off of one of my MF books that was a friend kind of said it as a joke. She's like, wouldn't it be funny if like the best friend and the boss ended up together? And I was like, actually, that is a really good idea. And that became my first romance, which is the Rainbow Clause. And once I wrote that, I knew I never wanted to write anything else.
Nice. Elle?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I've just been a reader forever. Once I got started reading, it was as a child, it was like, can you please put your book down at the dinner table, the breakfast table, the lunch table? So I've always read, and then I discovered kind of, same as I did grow up in Seattle. My parents, my mom and my stepdad are jewelry makers, and they often made rings for gay couples. This is in the 70s. Commitment kind of rings. So it was like I was ignorant that there was, anything out there. But as far as writing books, as something you could read about, that was something I didn't realize until I stumbled onto both, several different people kind of around the same time. But Suzanne Brockman's stories is the big one that I always think of, and especially because it's romantic suspense, and it just, sucked me in, and I had to know about Robin and Jules. So I got into writing, but I did want to write MF, which is kind of funny. That was like where I didn't realize that, there wasn't really a self-publishing kind of thing. And I'm not the kind of person who's very good, I don't think, because I've never tried it, at actually getting a publishing contract, because there's a lot of rules. So when I did I had a story and I was like, it's not working. What's wrong with this story? Oh, okay. It's about two men, and that was my first story. And once I got that figured out, it just kind of went from there. And now I've written, 25 books that are all romance. And I do love the genre. I will say, because I want to circle back to something that Beth said, I also have an MF pen name, and I'm just getting ready to release the first book in that. And my number one goal with that pen name, because I'm also writing romantic suspense, is to make my heroines rock star and with good guys, but not schlocky stupid, just like strong people that work together. So that it was like my goal, because that's what attracted me to romance, because that was your question. It's the equality of the relationship, yeah. Right? And it's so much easier to write when you're writing the same, or something like that. So anyway, there you go. That's me.
Okay, Davidson.
So I don't know. Mine's not as kind of like cool, I guess, as Beth's and Elle's was. But I started writing. Oh, I always wrote my whole life, but it was always just for me. And then I kind of found fan fiction, and I decided to write fan fiction, and I was doing it, and everyone would just say, I'd love to see these two characters together. And I was like, I was scared to write two men together, because I was like, I didn't think I could do that relationship justice. I was like, I'm gonna get ripped apart. They're gonna, but a lot of encouragement. So I went and did it, and something about it just clicked. It was the easiest thing I'd ever written in my life. And, being a bisexual woman my whole life, it was something about not just writing that, but then dipping into the community and meeting so many like-minded people, that I was able to explore myself with my writing. And it was the therapy the writing became home. It just made sense to me to be here. And I just kind of never looked back after that. I can't even pick up an MF book almost anymore. It doesn't feel right in my head and my heart. So I just, it kind of like we found each other, and it was like a a calling I didn't know I needed. So it's almost like I need it as much as I enjoy, doing it.
Okay, Raven.
I'm gay. No, I don't know. It feels like I want to tell the stories that make more sense to me. And so somebody should. So I spent high school writing illicit, very badly written, erotic stories that would get passed around in secret. And then that just kind of evolved from there. So
It's awesome.
Makes sense. Layla.
Yeah, so representation matters. I've really, within the last couple of years, started writing more across LGBTQ because I wanted to put those stories out there, because everyone, deserves their HEA and their love stories, and particularly wanting to see rep, for instance, in MF of a bisexual female, right? And so just, putting the representation out there is part of what I really love about writing it. And that, queer romance and queer folks living their best lives. Granted, there's, bullets and things like that and romantic suspense going on. But, that, the FBI agent's queer too, right? That the single mom mechanic who, she's only been with, married her high school sweetheart, had 2 kids, but is 35 and divorced, and can, has always been attracted to women, but decides to act on it, right? And so wanting to tell those stories and all the different ways that, we come to queer romance and queer experience.
Okay, Stephanie.
It never dawned on me not to write it. That sounds really, really weird. But I grew up in Baltimore. I mean, this is one place that's definitely a melting pot. You will find a little bit of anything and everything walking around. So it never dawned on me not to include gay people in my stories, because I was always around some gay friends or some gay people. And the first time I actually wrote a gay couple in a novel, that was way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, when I was writing for Laura's Cave. And I couldn't get them by as my main character, but as my friend was like pulling his hair out, of sick and tired of listening to me to rehash this plot over and over again, he said it would be cute if he made the secondary characters Jack and Jill. So that's how Jack and Jillian were born. And you would not believe the arguments and the fighting I had to do in 2001 to actually get them to stay, even as a secondary couple. I'm like, they're not my primary couple. And that just made me angry. So I'm like, why? I always believe that sexuality is on a sliding scale. You're not all one thing or the other, because generally there's something a little bit off about that thinking one or the other. Instead, we are allowed to have a rainbow of hosts, and we're allowed to have all kinds of lines on that scale. Nobody's exactly the same. Nobody falls there. So to me, sexuality has always been on a sliding scale. So it made sense to me to write what I know. So this is what I knew. And after yelling and screaming and fighting, Jack and Jillian got their say in the book, and people loved them. It got such a positive response that EC allowed me to do more characters without the same fight, because, they're making money off of that and people get a voice. So it's kind of a win-win. Everybody deserves representation, and everybody deserves to have their voices told and their stories heard. So I write for fantasy and romance and paranormal. It's like, why not? It's for everybody. I'm writing for everybody. So everybody needs to have a voice and everybody needs to have a say. And it's been ever since that first fight, if the story leads that way, that my characters are in the LGBTQ community, great. If they're not, doesn't matter, because, people are people and it's not such a big deal. I try to normalize it. So it's just a normal way of life in my writings.
Okay. Rachel.
Well, I've always loved romance. But I grew up in the late 70s and 80s where it was MF or nothing. And this was the era of Danielle Steele and Jude Devereaux. And so there were some distasteful tropes, but that's, you couldn't escape it at that time, because that's what the mainstream romance genre was. And then the internet came along and I discovered fan fiction and I discovered slash fan fiction. And then all of a sudden those power imbalance, abusive, consent issue-y stuff that you saw in male-female romance, it wasn't there, you know? I mean, it could be, but it was warned for. And it just really, the dynamic was so different and it appealed to me. And that kind of opened my eyes and I never looked back. And through fan fiction and fandom, as some other people have said, I learned things about my own identity that when I was, you know, a kid and a teenager, I think it was Beth who said it was like you were gay or you were everybody else. And that was my experience growing up in, you know, 1980s Oklahoma. And so, yeah, it not only satisfied my craving for romance, but it also taught me about my own identity, who I am as a person, as well as an author.
Okay. Yeah, for me, it was a combination of things. One was I read the last Harold Mage series, Magic's Promise, Magic's Pawn, Magic's Price by Mercedes Lackey. And it is such a sweeping, wonderful, heartbreaking, and yet hopeful trilogy with two young men discovering their own magic and their love for each other in a medieval culture that is not especially welcoming to them, even when they have great power. And yet they finally persevere. And that book and series made a huge impression on me. And I used to write fan fiction in the late 70s and early 80s that were all my favorite shows. And I didn't really think about it at the time, but now that I look back on it, it was all my stories were hurt, comfort, and there were always the two main male characters, and they were always, you know, you can't die, I won't let you, I can't live without you. And somebody finally said to me, are they gay? And I was like, oh no, they just really love each other a lot. Oh yeah, maybe I guess they are. Kind of snuck up on me. But what really did was I fell in love with supernatural. And let me back up and say, I never could read male-female romance. I never identified with women in those books. And I know it has gotten better on many fronts than when I was trying to read it in the 70s and 80s, but they weren't me. And I didn't want to be them. And I didn't like many of the tropes, like several people have said, ew. And so I just figured I didn't like romance, except as kind of a flavoring in with suspense or drama or something like that. And then I fell in love with supernatural, and it went on hiatus between seasons, and I started reading fanfic again for the first time in decades. And after I'd read several hundred of the general fics, I took a turn and started reading the slash and loved it. And read several hundred of those and said, okay, I wonder what the published stuff that isn't based in a fandom looks like. And of course, the first series that I found coming out of the slash fiction corner was Jordan L. Hawk's Wittershin series. And I was like, oh, I'm home. And I said, this is entirely too much fun. I got to start writing this. And that's how Morgan Brice happened. And I love sharing those characters and sharing characters across the LGBTQ spectrum, whether they're the main characters or they're side characters, and having them just be them. No big deal. They're just them. And I love building those kinds of worlds. We aren't quite there in the real world, but we can make it that way in our worlds. And I really love creating that and living there in my head as much as I possibly can. Ari?
Oh, like many people, I came through fanfic, which is the gateway drug of of a lot of people. And though I did grow up with, my mother's brother was gay and he had his partner, and that was in the 70s, but we were in Miami. And so there was much more acceptance, I think, where I grew up, as far as I knew people in high school who were gay. That was not a problem. And yes, that was way back in the 70s and 80s. But that was just something that was normal to me. It was not something that was ever ooh or taboo. So, but they're just, I don't know what actually drew me in, except the stories for gay characters were just so much more interesting. And it probably does have something to do with the power dynamic. But I was the geek girl in school. And so I was always part of sci-fi, which was also very, very accepting. I mean, we had Thieves World, which had all kinds of characters who their sexuality was very different. And K/S, which anybody who's been in Trek, that was something from way back in the 60s that was a big thing. And so that was where I went, you know, via anime, and then through Rachel and I met in a fandom that is now somewhat problematic. But you know, we started with a role-playing game and writing fanfic together. And then it's like, hey, as we started writing more and more AU type stuff for these characters in somebody else's universe, it's like, you know, if we just made these our own characters, you know, we're already writing original stuff. And so we went with it, and we started selling, and we haven't looked back.
I think a lot of authors have, I mean, I definitely got my start writing fanfic back in the 70s and 80s before there was an AO3, when you had to pass the photocopy.
I think I'm the only one here who's never written fanfic.
But I think so many of us have, and certain shows and fandoms seem to have more representation than others. But that's what taught me that I could entertain people, and that I could tell a story. So yeah, it's definitely the gateway drug. And I think it's also a place where you can write anything your heart desires. And then you read the AU stories, you go, you could just change the names, and this is already a completely original story. It has now outgrown the fandom that spawned it and gone off and grown up and moved out of the house, so to speak. So now everyone here has been kicking around the genre for a while. What are some of the shifts or changes or trends that you've seen come and go? Or, and I'll start with Elle this time.
Why? You must have heard me thinking, don't start with me, don't start with me.
I could read your expression. It was, don't pick me, don't pick me. You're doomed.
I feel like, you know, I guess I feel like there used to be more, it's more really lighthearted, really rom-com-y stuff right now, which is fine. That's good. That's just not what I write. But there is a shift, and I'm seeing, or I guess I think we're in the middle of it. I don't even think it's a shift. I think it's just there for a while, and then we'll move along to something else. When I mean, for a while, I've also seen happier, I guess rom-com is happier, but I don't know if I'm making sense. But, you know, when I first started reading MM it wasn't that there wasn't an AGA, because there was, you know, that's kind of one of the unbroken rules, but often it was everything I picked up was like this angst-ridden story, and I love angst as much as the next person, but I'm seeing a lot less of that, and a lot more like I guess I want to say character driven, you know, stories or other kinds of things. I
think what you're saying, Elle, is that like so many of them were like angst over identity, and
yes.
I'm seeing like way less angst over identity, which is really awesome.
It is. Thank you. That is exactly why I'm circling around the drain to try and say. So that's it, you know. And I guess as far as like other stuff, like, you know, we see everything else just kind of comes and goes, you know. And there's some people that just always write the same, they stick within their decided lane, and you know what they're going to write, and it's awesome, you know what I mean. But there are some people that shift, and now I'm going to be quiet.
And Davidson.
I think kind of what Elle was saying, I always refer to it as like my son, for example. He's autistic, so he goes through phases of different things that he's kind of targeting, dinosaurs and sharks and astronomy, and, you know, and just moves. And I feel, you know, before I wrote in this genre, I ran a blog for this genre for almost a decade. And one of the things I always noticed, everything came in waves. You would have that vampires phase, you'd have the zombies phase, then you'd have the motorcycle phase, the mafia phase, then you'd have those, you know, best friend dad phase. Everything, you know, kind of just goes. And that's why, like, I always say to everybody all the time when they're writing, like, write what it is that is speaking to you, because I promise you the wheel will spin and it will be something again. So in this genre, in this community, more so than, I can't really speak actually in other communities, so I'm just gonna not. I noticed that everything comes around, nothing ever is stagnant for a long period of time, you know. And so I guess it's kind of hard to say, like, what things have I seen go, because I think everything's gone, but then it all comes back again. So that's one of the greatest things about the LGBT, you know, book world, is if you want it, it's out there, I promise you. And sometimes it'll be more prominent, and then sometimes it'll just kind of like be like, oh, I'm gonna sit here and wait my turn and I'll be back. You know, that's why, like, that's when I started to write more about whatever it was that I was feeling in my heart, instead of, you know, like Elle said, staying in my lane. I was just like, no, I don't want to stay in my lane. I want to go over to the left fast lane. You know, so that's what I did. And it does, it comes back around. It does. I love that.
Okay, Raven.
Yeah, I would agree that there's been a lot more sort of fluff lately, which, at least from like the men in queer romance, have been kind of asking that happens, that we just have these nice happy stories sometimes. Like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we were just happy? Oh, look. But also, like, we're seeing very begrudgingly, not as quickly as I think anyone would like, but we're seeing more diversity, because at least when I started, which was over 10 years ago, it was very much, everyone was a straight acting, passing white guy in his mid-20s. And that was the hero, and that was also the hero that he was in love with. And so that's growing. We're seeing, especially with like the daddy romances now, we're getting older, and we're seeing stuff that isn't daddy boy now, which is, you know, I'm not having an issue with daddy boy. It's just nice to see that there's more out there.
Okay, Rachel.
I'm going to piggyback off of what Raven just said, that's well, one of the beauties of the community is that in terms of ideas, you can find literally anything you want. I remember, I think it was the last continual panel I was on, somebody was talking about their mer people tentacle erotica. It was not like they were involving
Stephanie.
Yeah, they were involving octopuses.
That was me.
So it's like, literally, if you want it, you can find it. But like Raven said, you know, I mean, Ari and I have been doing this. We've got our 10-year pubiversary this month, actually. And when we started, it was, you know, young white dudes. And that has definitely changed. Again, not maybe as quickly as it should, but yeah, there's more age diversity, there's more gender identity diversity, there's more race diversity. And it's really nice to see that, you know, because to be honest, the older I get, the less I relate to 20 somethings, and it makes it hard for me to write, you know. So, you know, being able to write heroes who are in their 40s, 50s and upward, it's good for, I think, both of us, because that kind of character mindset is more relatable for us than somebody in their 20s. It's like, yeah, we're away from that. So.
Okay, Stephanie.
I have a good one that I see has disappeared, and I hope it never, ever, ever returns. It's the one when you have to punish the gay people for being gay. And generally that punishment meant in the form of you died at the end. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was a huge trope in novels, and it was a huge trope in anime and other things. You have a wonderful gay couple and they fought so hard to be together, but either one of them died or both of them died. And then you get the tragic crying at the end, sobbing over your head or crying into your shirt. And somebody just gave up. I don't know. I'm quite sure this author did not know what to do to the ending of her book. Her gay couple was having a nice little luncheon at a restaurant talking about how much they loved each other, and then terrorists blew up the place, and that was the end of it. And I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Where are all these gay bodies that we're supposed to be seeing if this is how the romance ends? And why are we punishing people like this? So it was kind of like we're begrudgingly feeding you something, but then of course, we have to make everybody happy. So this can't exist. You cannot be happy in the end. You have to die. And then we find that tragic love. I don't want that tragic love. I wanted to love. I'm not into zombie things. I wanted my people around to maybe have their argument if we want to have kids in the future, or, maybe they'll break up or arguing about the house. I wanted that ever after to be logical and realistic and not punishing it anyway. So I'm so thankful that trope has been balled up and basically tossed out the window. Hopefully it never, ever comes back to that, because I could just imagine with a child or, a teenager or somebody who's trying to read around to help find themselves, see this, and all that does is, if I'm in love with this person, that must mean I'm worthy of death. So I must die. I must commit suicide, or I'll never have true love, because if I want to survive, I can't be gay. That was subliminally the messages I was getting from that. And it really and truly ticked me off more than anything. So I'm so glad that is gone. Nobody's just dying for no apparent reason, and no more terrorist attacks in cute little French cafes when gay couples are trying to have some coffee and talk about the future. So yay.
Layla.
Yeah, I think folks have said a lot of what I would comment on, like normalization, having more of the happy, less of the super angsty coming out. I do like that we're seeing the more mature characters and how coming out can look for someone who's coming to their identity later in life. And I think we're seeing a lot of those stories, which I love, like that's relatable, right? And so I love seeing those. And kind of on what Stephanie said, the HEAs and also what the HEAs look like. I think particularly, one of the things that bugged me about MF romance, I still read it and write it and everything, but like, I don't need a marriage and a baby. Like, that's not the end all be all, right? I'm like, no. And so I always thought we had more flexibility in LGBTQ romance in that regard. And so, but we also have the ability to have the marriage and the kids too, right? And no one's like, you must get married, right? For it to be an HEA. So I've always loved that. And I also like that we're seeing less of the evil exes trope. That one kind of drives me nuts. And that, if there is a kid involved, we've got people who are co-parenting, who, and then exes who are setting someone up with somebody else. And like, right. I love seeing exes that are friends. Like maybe that's a dream, but I love seeing that. And not that the evil ex is always the bad guy. And so I think we're seeing, maybe that goes into the fluffier, less angsty stories. But at least personally, like that's one of the things I like that shift.
I mean, honestly, I think after the last couple of years, we all deserve fluff and marshmallows and ice cream and ponies. I mean, just for being here. So yay, fluff. I think the trope that I'm happy to see go, and I saw a lot of it, especially in traditional urban fantasy that had a female protagonist, and that was love triangles. And I hate love triangles. Make up your mind.
Poly. Make it poly.
Yeah, make it poly or make up your mind. And since everything that I write that's male romance also really has one foot in urban fantasy, that was something I just decided I was never going to do. Was I don't like that kind of tension. I don't like that kind of angst. It's not something I seek out to read. Your mileage may vary, but that's not something that that I've enjoyed. And so I promised myself when I started writing urban fantasy, both as Gail and Morgan, I was never going to do that. And fortunately, I'm glad to see that that's become less of a given in urban fantasy, where there has to be this, you know, long protracted, will they or won't they make up their mind between the people. And I like the make it poly or make up your mind. I think that's a good motto. Ari?
One thing that I had noticed, and now this was back when I first started reading was there was a lot more dubcon. And I don't think I have seen dubcon in many years. Now, you know, I tend to avoid anything that even looks like that these days, but it did seem like for a while that, you know, I don't know if it was hearkening off to the old terrible tropes of MF romance, but there was a lot of dubcon, especially in the Gay for You stories that I was seeing back, you know, this is like 10 years ago. But I was really glad to see that go away, because that just was not something that I think, especially these days, I don't think we need that. And I think that, you know, like in the BDSM stories that, you know, Rachel and I have written, it's always like consent is a big effing deal. And so that's something I was very, very glad to see go away.
I do think we've seen more on the page consent. Like,
Yeah,
characters having that conversation in whatever context it is, if it's BDSM or anything. And so like, that's such a great thing to see.
And also, there is still the dubcon out there, but we're much better community-wide at labeling it right up front, saying this is what you're going to get.
I mean, it went the way of the condoms. I remember when we first started writing, especially in romance genre, back in the early aughts, everything you would read, everybody was doing everything raw, to say the least. When we hit around the mid 90s, somebody put a bug in someone's ear and was like, okay, if we're going to be writing in this trope, people are going to be following along with this. We need to have some responsibility. So we need to start putting condoms on things. And that became a thing that people don't even think about nowadays, especially when you're dealing with urban fantasy or contemporary. A condom will pop up. I mean, proper preparation will pop up. And now I'm seeing that same thing pop up with everything else. I mean, consent, especially consent is huge. We're living in the age of Me Too. And Me Too is not just for women, it's guys that have been abused out there too. So, I mean, I think that's not going to go anywhere. It's going to become a staple like the condom. And I'm so happy with that. I'm thrilled with that.
Okay, Beth.
I mean, I just want to say, like, normalizing consent is awesome. Like, I've been trying to do that more, like, on page. Someone mentioned this trope, and I frankly could not be happier that it isn't called this anymore, but Gay for You makes me kind of crazy as a bisexual woman. And it isn't so much the idea that you can't, I mean, because someone, I think it was Stephanie that talked about sliding scale, and I really love that. And there's also like this idea that like you can be sexually attracted to one gender, but then romantically attracted to the other. And there's different levels there that we're talking about. It's like not very black and white. It's very gray. And so really what you're saying is that you are just potentially a queer person, or you're potentially pansexual or bisexual. And the Gay for You trope, like, erase that completely. Like, I mean, that is just not a thing that happens. Like, you know, you have possibly an unexplored part of your sexuality. That's what it actually is. So I kind of, like, starting in 2014, when I published the Rainbow Clause, I was like, this will be the hill that I will die on. And I read a lot of bisexual characters. I read a lot of bisexual characters that are entering a same-sex relationship for the first time. And I really enjoy exploring that theme. And I really enjoy that we are now seeing less of that term Gay for You and more of like bisexual awakening, queer awakening. And that's just really awesome. I love that a lot. The other thing I was going to say that I really am enjoying so much is the surge of PNR and fantasy and sci-fi, because it almost feels like the point of the books isn't that the people are queer. The point of the books is that there's this really cool adventure and they just happen to also be gay, or they happen to also be a lesbian. And that kind of normalization that, like, you know, people are people is like just really exciting and awesome to me. And yeah, that's something I personally would like to explore more. So that's the two biggest trends that I've seen, because back in 2014, like, there was some paranormal, but it was, I don't know, it was very niche, and it wasn't as, definitely was not as prominent as it is today.
Okay. Well, folks, believe it or not, we have blown through our time. So lightning round here. I want to give everybody a chance to very quickly tell people what your newest or most recent book is and where we can find you online, starting with Davidson.
I wasn't prepared. Last month was my latest release. It was Emperor of Dragons, which is book 2 in my Black Veil series. Dragons, mermaids. I pretty much throw everything into that world. All my books are on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited, so Amazon. You can find everything at davidsonking.com. You can also subscribe to my newsletter and get everything and all my info there.
All right, Raven.
I had 2 projects come out within like a week of each other last month. So if you like contemporary, it's A Teaspoon of Desire. And if you like paranormal, it's called Freshman Magic, and that's on Steam, not on Amazon. The other one is a book. You can find it where books are. And if you want more information, it's ravendeHart.com.
Nice. Rachel?
Okay, so we've got a book coming out this month on June 14th. Fortress, Book 1, A Prince Among Men, will be debuting. And this is a action thriller series that we're starting. You can find all of our books on Amazon, and our website is remckay.com.
Stephanie?
Actually, just past Thursday, I had the second in the How Not to Date a Dragon trilogy drop. It's called Dragon Lord, and that is LGBTQ in the fantasy paranormal world, far, far, far away from here, with dragons and shapeshifters and magic and flesh-eating unicorns. You name it, I kind of sprinkled it up in there. And you can find me and all my works at author stephanieburke.online, or you can look me up on Facebook or in Google.
Nice. Layla? Layla? Somehow I put your initials and switched them. Sorry. It's been a long week.
So my latest release is Dead Draw. It dropped today. And so it is the first book in a new romantic suspense trilogy with a spinoff character that lives in my Fog City / whiskey verse. FBI hacker, legal attaché, and another FBI agent enter into a marriage of convenience to catch a common enemy. So that's what this series is. And you can find it on, it's wide, so all platforms. And audio is also available already, and the print is available already. And I am at www.laylareyne.com, and all the socials are at Layla Reyne.
Nice. Ari?
As Rachel said, we have Fortress, A Prince Among Men coming out on the 14th, which is also our 50th publication, which we're very excited about. And I am on Facebook constantly. So if you look for R.E. McKay on Facebook, you'll find me, message me, whatever. I love to talk to people. And we are on Amazon. Everything is in Kindle Unlimited. And you can find both R.E. McKay and Rachel Langella. We each have our own separate author page for the 2 different genres.
Beth?
Just had a book come out, the first in my new football series. This is Playing for Keeps. It's a book about the coach's son and a player who is kind of like beginning to kind of age out of his position. So there's a lot of really fun, like forbidden love and a little bit of antagonistic friends to lovers kind of in there. So it's super fun. I am at bethbolden.com. That book and my others are all on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And you can find me at Beth Bolden Author on Facebook and Instagram.
Nice. Elle?
Oh, yeah. So my last release was this one, Real Risk, and it's the 3rd in my West Coast Forensic series. It came out last month. May 20, no, I don't know when it came out. April. It seems like yesterday, but it was just April. It's the third in a series. It's older lovers. They're both in their 40s. It's a romantic suspense because that's what I write. But this one is a little more, I would say, thrillery than mystery. And it's an ex-ATF agent who now runs a forensic service. He's a fireman, a fire chief. And then, like I said, it's set on my small island, and it was really fun to write. I have to say, it was a good time to write this one. They're very snarky because they don't actually like each other in the beginning. I mean, they're not enemies, but so.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbrice.com. I'm on all social media, especially Facebook, but Pinterest, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of them. Spell the name right, you'll find me. But most of the time, I'm here on Continual. So thank you to everybody for being with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more romance coming up here on Continual. And happy Pride Month.